The zipper closes in under a second. You don't feel it happen. Fabric settles on your shoulders. A seam presses against your skin. You don't think about any of it. It's automatic. A jacket is just a jacket. Now strip that away. No fur, no thick hide, no natural insulation worth mentioning. You are one of the only mammals on Earth that cannot survive a cold night using its own body, not without help. And yet humans live in Siberia, in the Arctic Circle, in mountain passes, where wind alone kills an unprotected animal in hours. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because of the thing you just put on without thinking, and the timeline behind it is stranger and far more recent than almost anyone assumes. Here's the part that trips people up first. Humans didn't lose their body hair because of clothing. We were already nearly naked long before anyone wove a single thread. Somewhere between 1 and 3 million years ago, our ancestors lost most of their fur, tied, most researchers believe, to the need to sweat efficiently while hunting under an African sun. Not cold. Heat was the threat back then. A hairless body with millions of sweat glands could chase prey across open grassland for hours, in the middle of the day, when every other predator was resting in shade. That trade-off worked brilliantly in Africa. It was a disaster waiting to happen everywhere else, which leaves a gap, over 1 million years wide. No fur, no protection, and a planet that was about to get a lot colder. Something had to fill that gap, not whether. When? You'd expect the answer to come from cloth itself. It doesn't. Fabric rots, hide rots. Ancient clothing does not survive 50,000 years in the ground. So archaeologists had to get clever, and the breakthrough came from the last place anyone expected: lice. Head lice and body lice are almost the same species genetically. One difference: body lice can only live in clothing. They lay eggs in fabric seams, not on skin. No clothing, no body lice. Simple as that. In a landmark study, geneticists Ralph Kittler, Manfred Kayser, and Mark Stoneking compared the DNA of both louse populations to find when they split apart. The answer, roughly 170,000 years ago. That number matters. It means clothing wasn't there at the dawn of our species. It arrived later, as a specific tool, right around the time modern humans were preparing to leave Africa for good. That's the pivot almost nobody talks about. Clothing wasn't invented out of general discomfort. It was invented right when our bodies ran out of options. Genetics tells you when. Stone tools tell you how. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, researchers found stone scrapers dating back roughly 60,000 years, microscopic wear patterns on the edges, fat and tissue scraped off animal hides, preparation, not decoration. This wasn't a one-off. Similar tools turn up across the continent. By this point, hideworking wasn't experimental. It was routine. Archaeologist Lynn Wadley, who led much of the Sibudu excavation, noted that the layered evidence at the site, combined with bedding material and fire use, points to people actively managing comfort and warmth, not just survival at the barest margin. But a scraped hide is still just a hide. Wrapped around the shoulders, tied at the neck, functional, crude. The real leap came later, and it left behind one of the quietest, most astonishing objects in all of archaeology: a needle. In 2016, researchers pulled a bone needle out of Denisova Cave in Siberia, a drilled eye threaded through, roughly 50,000 years old, among the oldest sewing needles ever found. You don't need a needle to wrap a hide, you need one to tailor it, to cut shaped pieces, to stitch tight seams that trap heat instead of leaking it. That single object is the difference between wearing something and engineering it. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Homo sapiens weren't alone in Eurasia during this window. Neanderthals had already survived European winters for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans showed up. And the evidence at their sites looks different. Simple hide draping, basic tools, no fine scraping, no needlework. Anthropologist Mark Collard, comparing tool assemblages across Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens sites, found that sapiens groups used up to 5 times more specialized hide-working tools per site. Some researchers argue this gap in cold-weather technology may explain why Homo sapiens pushed further into extreme environments: Arctic Russia, Siberia, eventually across the Bering Land Bridge, in ways Neanderthals largely couldn't. A needle may have quietly redrawn the map of who got to go where. Picture it. Siberia, roughly 45,000 years ago. Cold enough that breath freezes mid-air. A woman crouches near a fire with a sliver of bone in one hand, a stone awl in the other. She's drilled a hole barely wider than a hair, over and over, patient, wasting nothing. Beside her, strips of hide. are cut to shape, not wrapped, cut. She threads sinew through the eye of the needle and pulls a seam tight across a sleeve. Outside, the wind hasn't stopped for 3 days. Inside this one shelter, for the first time in her lineage's history, the cold isn't winning. There's a second, quieter thread running through this same window, and it's written into your DNA right now. As humans pushed into northern latitudes and started covering their bodies for most of the year, something had to give on sunlight exposure. Skin needs UV light to produce vitamin D. Cover the skin too well, in a place with too little sun, and deficiency follows. Geneticists studying pigmentation genes like SLC24A5 have found that lighter skin tones spread through northern populations in a pattern that lines up almost exactly with this same period of intensified clothing use. Cover the body to survive the cold, and the body quietly recalibrates itself in return. Clothing didn't just change behavior, it left a mark on the genome. Once tailored clothing existed, it stopped being a workaround. It became a technology. Groups moved through terrain that would have killed them 100,000 years earlier. Populations pushed into Arctic Russia by roughly 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Sites like Sungir, north of Moscow, preserve burials from this period with thousands of ivory beads arranged in patterns that match exactly where sewn garments would have been: cuffs, hoods, boots. Archaeologists reconstructing the burial concluded the individuals were dressed, at time of death, in fully tailored fur suits. Winters no bare human body could survive. Clothing didn't just keep individuals alive, it opened entire continents. And there's a quieter shift buried in the same window. Once bodies were reliably covered, clothing didn't stay purely functional for long. Ochre-stained hide, deliberate patterning, personal ornament, all showing up in roughly the same period. Almost the moment humans solved the survival problem, they started using the solution to say something: status, identity, who belongs where. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan, who has spent years studying the origins of clothing, argues that once garments became reliable, they almost immediately split into two categories that still exist today: clothing for warmth and clothing for display. We didn't invent fashion after we solved survival. Fashion arrived on its heels, practically overnight. The moment covering the body stopped being optional is roughly the moment it became social. That thread runs in a straight line from a 50,000-year-old bone needle to the jacket on your shoulders right now. Which brings you back to the zipper, closes in under a second, no danger, no calculation, no chance tonight is the night you don't make it. For most of the time modern humans have existed, that was never guaranteed. Somewhere in a cave in Siberia, someone sat with a sliver of bone and a hole barely wider than a hair, solving a problem their species would otherwise not have survived. You're wearing the answer right now. It feels like nothing. That's not because the problem was small. It's because it got solved so completely you never had to think about it again. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. We make videos like this one every week about ancient human behavior, about what your body still remembers, about the gap between the world you were built for and the one you actually live in. If that is something you want more of, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm this kind of storytelling is worth keeping alive. See you in the next one.